Hey, this is Rich O'Neill with Elite Functional Performance here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And today we're here to talk to you about hips. More specifically, the type of stuff that we've been seeing coming in a lot since work from home began, pertaining to people's hip flexor tightness and the general lumbo-pelvic hip complex. We've been seeing some folks coming in that have been, working in different capacities, from being in a perfect ergonomic seat in the office setup to now maybe being on a bar stool on the laptop over the kitchen island for a little bit longer than they're used to. We've seen some folks work from a less than optimal position with a laptop on a sofa, creating some positions in the hips that have got things a little bit more snug than we've seen in recent scenarios involving those same archetypes of office workers and work from home folks. So we got some strategies that we're going to plug in today using some very basic tools and take you through everything that you need to know to be able to clean up some of that stuff and start feeling and moving better. So we're going to use a basic foam roller. This is the kind of standard circumference, 6-inch circumference, about 18 inches long. We've got the 3 foot at the same circumference. These are varying in density from firm to a little bit softer. And then for our turbo version, we have the bumpy roller. This is just the highest level that we can get as far as really bringing a lot of intensity to the tissue that we're going to find that's very tight. So the areas that we're going to be focusing on today are going to be the front of the hip, what we call the anterior hip capsule, specifically the muscles in the front of the hip that start at the pelvis and run down the front of the thigh. And then we're going to also focus on the lateral hamstring on the back of the leg, the area that gets very squashed when we're sitting on a chair. So we're going to tie that into the seated position and show you guys why we find this to be a very important area to focus on, and then show you some strategies on the roller. So when we find ourselves in a chair or in a seated position, what becomes problematic for the front of the thigh is that the knee gets to this height of the hip or perhaps even a bit higher. That's going to take this whole area on the front side of the hip and get things very snug, very short. So if you think about where the quad muscles attach on the front side of the hip, and where some of the core muscles come down into the abdomen and insert on the front side of the hip, this is an area that gets very snug and very congested from a lot of time being spent in that hip flexed position. The secondary problem that we see with being in this position for a lengthy period of time, whether that's in a vehicle or on a desk chair, is the underneath part of the leg, the part that literally gets squashed into the chair or leaned on if we're driving in a position like that. The lateral hamstring and the IT band on the backside get very adhered. They get almost stuck on top of one another, and we lose some of the glide back in there that's supposed to be very smooth and very fluid. So we're going to use the foam roller today and take you guys through some strategies to help unlock and change some of the structure back here in the hamstring as well as in the front of the hip. Okay, so the first area we're going to get to is right down here on the front side of the hip. It's pretty much the spot that if I was going to stick my hand into my pocket, I'd be touching that muscle right there. It's going to start on the top side of the hip and kind of fan down the front here and directly on the side. We call this muscle tensor fascia lata. For today, we're just going to refer to it as TFL. So this is the main hip flexor that lives on the front side of the hip that when we're in that flex position gets very short and very snug. What's problematic about this particular muscle is that it then turns, as it fans down the lateral side of the leg, it turns into the IT band. It goes from a muscle into a fascial tissue and then inserts on the side of the knee on the lateral side. So we got to be able to not so much move downstream with this, but really attack it at the top of the hip where the muscle piece is. Okay, so we're going to grab the foam roller and come down and put the foam roller right into that area of the hip. So I'll start with getting the hip down on that spot. I'm going to put my forearm down on the ground and my other hand can be off to the side there for some support. Now what's important is going to be what I do with this foot here. I got to have that foot flat on the ground. I want this knee to be bent. And I want there to be some space in this area right here that we're going to utilize in a little bit. Now, once I'm on this position, I'm really starting to focus on whether it's more to the side of the leg or maybe a little bit more on the front side of the thigh, but we're going to start to find an area that's pretty tender. This is where we know we're in the right zone. So once we feel that area starts to get a little bit tender, maybe I move downstream a little bit toward the mid part of the thigh, I can commit a little more to the front side. But once I find the spot that doesn't particularly feel pleasant and feels to be maybe the most sensitive, once I have that position, I'm gonna stop moving. Then I'm gonna bend my back leg, the leg that I'm pressing on, to 90 degrees, and I'm just gonna bring my knee through that space that we made with that foot. If my foot was here, I wouldn't have the space to come through. So I move that foot out of the way, and I begin bringing my knee through. So what we're doing here is we're purposely moving through the action of hip flexion while I've got direct pressure down on the tissue. So when this area is snug, it inhibits the amount of flexion that we get out of the hip when we do things like go up and down stairs, get in and out of vehicles, ride a bicycle. People tend to feel that tightness in the front of the hip. So we want to put direct pressure on the area that's snug and then begin flexing the hip to regain those lost degrees of range of motion. We want to think about keeping the knee bent, and after about 8 to 10 kicks, we stop kicking, and then I can kind of like move my leg as if it was a windshield wiper. Just back and forth like that. And we do that about 8 or 10 times. We'll complete that on both sides and spend about 2 minutes on each leg. All right, so the next position that we're gonna work on is gonna tackle the area on the back of the leg here where that IT band meets the lateral hamstring. This is the part of the leg that tends to get very compressed and almost very sticky from being in a chair for too long. So the IT band kind of gets stuck against the back of that hamstring, and our next strategy with the foam roller is gonna help kind of create some space in there and get things to let go. And I'm gonna start by getting the foam roller up on my butt. I'll have both hands out behind my body to support myself in an upright position. And then from here, I'm gonna turn my foot to the outside. The purpose of that is to bias the outside of the leg to make sure that I'm not so much in the middle of the hamstring, but really more to the outside by where the IT band lives. I'm gonna start to move my body, bringing the roller down my leg, about midway to the thigh and then back up until I find the particular area that, very much like on the front side, was a little unpleasant, maybe feels a little sticky. For me, it's right about there. When we find the spot that we're looking for, what we call a hot spot or a hot zone, we're gonna stop moving, pull the toe toward the knee, and then just begin sawing the leg side to side. Now the saw technique works side to side simply because the fibers run very longitudinally. So when the fibers run from the hip down to the knee of the muscle, we find the spot that's snug and then move in a cross direction on that area. So we do this, again, about 8 to 10 kicks. We can move down a little bit, maybe find the next spot. If I need to reposition my hands, I can do that. Find the next spot there, stop moving, and then kick that foot back and forth, saw for 8 to 10. We're gonna do this back and forth in every zone for about 2 minutes each time. So whether you're working from home, spending a lot of time in the vehicle, or doing a lot of exercise with high velocity and high repetition hip flexion, these strategies we went through today are going to help you unlock the key areas that tend to give people a lot of problems, and you'll be feeling you better and moving better. So thank you for watching this video, and please be sure to check out our website for more information and to leave us a message to get started with us.